Welcome to Season Liberally. My name is Cecil. Today we're going to be making a very simple mac and cheese recipe that you won't need a recipe card to remember because all you need to do is remember the ratio. It's a wonderful comfort food. I hope you stick around. Welcome back to Season Liberally. Thank you for sticking with us. We're sorry we haven't produced anything in a while, but we did move the set. As you can see, it's a brand new set. We moved from our condo downtown in Chicago to a place that's a little farther out in the suburbs. It's a different kitchen setup. So the older kitchen had a much better setup in that it had a induction cooktop right in the center of the island. And I was able to set up cameras and really it worked very well for filming. This kitchen's not as conducive to that, so I'm going to be working around it for a little bit. But I did get this induction cooktop, so I can still have a very similar set. Thank you again for coming back, and we hope that we're going to do this a little more regularly now that we have a little more space and we can do this sort of production a little easier. So today we're going to be doing mac and cheese. Now, mac and cheese can be very complicated. You can do all kinds of funky, fun stuff, especially family traditions. There's plenty of different family traditions that have different types of recipes for mac and cheese. But what I want to do is teach you one that instead of reaching for that Kraft mac and cheese dinner that people do very quickly, you instead use this recipe because it's very easy to remember and it's super fast. So what we're going to do today is we're going to make a cream sauce, a white cream sauce using milk, flour, and butter. The flour and butter is going to mix together in what they call a roux. That's a very traditional thickening method for sauces. We're going to thicken that up. We're going to salt and pepper it, make it taste really good. Then we're going to add our cheese. Once that's done, we're going to coat our noodles in it. And then I'm going to show you a way to make this without the breadcrumbs. You can, of course, add some breadcrumbs, and I'm going to show you how to do that. But I'm not going to make it myself with the breadcrumbs. Not a huge fan of that particular method. I'm not a huge fan of breadcrumbs on top of mac and cheese. I don't think for me, it doesn't add a lot. And I'd much prefer the method I'm going to show you today. But of course, you can change this up and add a little breadcrumbs. It's not going to change the recipe that drastically. So we're going to get started. A couple of ground rules. One, use whole milk. This is not a health food. So don't bother using something that is, you don't want to use anything that is, doesn't have enough milk fat content. You could, of course, add a little heavy cream to it. That's up to you. It's a little too rich for me, but if you want to add a little heavy cream, a little half and half, you're perfectly welcome to. But I would start as a baseline using whole milk. Also, don't go out and buy grated cheese. Grate your cheese. I grated my cheese about a half an hour earlier. It has been sitting at room temperature, and that's what I want. I want it to come up to room temperature so it's easier to melt. I've got some Gouda here. I've got some aged cheddar, and I have a little bit of brie. The ratio that I'm going to tell you, you can pretty easily figure out how much cheese you're going to need. And then you want to grate it yourself. When you go buy that grated cheese that's already grated in the supermarket, it's got a little bit of stabilizer on the outside so it doesn't stick together with the rest of the cheese. You don't want to reach into a big bag of Kraft shredded cheese and get one giant amalgamous clump. You want shreds. And so they put some stuff on there to make sure that it stays in its shredded form. That's not great for making sauces. And so what we want to do is we want to take that out of there. We don't want that. So grate your own cheese. That's the first thing you want to do. You want to make sure that if you're going to do this, use good cheese. Again, it's not a health food. So you want to use really high quality ingredients, high fat ingredients. That's why I'm adding brie. And you want to make sure that you grate this cheese on your own. So for this recipe, I've already cooked my macaroni. So this is a pound of macaroni. You're going to want to use however much macaroni you want, and you can use all different types of noodles. I chose macaroni because it's traditional, but you can choose all different types of noodles. There's plenty of different types of noodles out there that are wonderful in a cream sauce. So the ratio is super simple. It's 1 to 1 to 1 to 1. 1 tablespoon of butter, 1 tablespoon of flour, 1 cup of milk, 1 cup of shredded cheese. That's going to create a wonderful sauce. The milk and the roux, what we're going to make here a roux, is going to thicken up very nicely. The cheese is going to add another layer of thickness to it and creaminess, and that's going to create a perfect consistency. And it's super easy to remember because, like I said, it's 1 to 1 to 1 to 1. All you have to do is remember that it's 2 of them are tablespoons and 2 of them are cups. That's it. You don't even have to write it down. So we're going to get started with our roux here. We want to set our roux up in a nice, we want to get a pan warm. We take our butter and we put it in the bottom of our pan and we start melting it. Now, as it starts to melt, I don't want it to burn, so I'm stirring it pretty well. This is 4 tablespoons of butter. I'm adding 4 tablespoons of flour. This is regular all-purpose flour. Now I'm going to switch out and not use a spatula anymore right now. I'm going to actually use a whisk. I want to make sure that this is 100% incorporated in here. What we're creating is a roux. Basically what we're doing is we're coating every single one of these flour particles with a little bit of fat. And that fat is whole butter. Now, we have to cook this a little bit, because if I were just to just add my milk now, it would thicken, but it would taste like flour. And we want to cook a little bit of that starch out. Now, you would, if you were making a different color sauce, you could continue to cook this roux until it gets browner. There's a brown roux, a red roux, farther you go down, and the longer that you cook it. The more you cook it, the less thickening power it has. But we are making what they call a blonde roux, and it's going to be just very quickly. Now, you can see how it's bubbling. We want it to bubble. We want it to change color just ever so slightly. And now we're going to add our 4 cups of milk. And here's the trick. Cold milk in a hot roux. If it's a cold roux, you want to add it to a warm something. That's always the rule. So different temperatures on between your roux and your liquid. So today we're adding cold milk to this. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to add a little at first to start and just keep stirring it. I don't want it to, what I don't want is for it to lump up. And so I'm going to add it slowly and make it, and you can see it's thickening. It's got a nice thickening power to it. Once it starts turning into a sauce, then I'm going to just start whisking the hell out of it and pour the rest of my milk in. And I'm going to get it all from the sides. Make sure there's no roux sticking to the bottom here. And I'm going to stir the hell out of it so that there's no lumps in here. What we don't want is lumps. I'm going to add the rest of my milk. 4 cups of milk, 4 tablespoons of butter, 4 tablespoons of flour. And I'm going to stir it. And I'm going to keep stirring it until it's ready. Now, I don't have to be super diligent about it, but I do want to make sure that I stir it quite a bit. I'm going to let it go for a couple, like 30 seconds or so. But in the meantime, I am going to make a gratin top for this, so I did start my oven. And if you're going to cook it, again, if you're going to cook it with the breadcrumbs on top, you want to get your oven started and get it ready to go. You can also concurrently cook your pasta while you're making your sauce. That's, again, a time saver. I did it a little earlier because I only have 1 burner, but you can do it at the same time. It saves a little time. Undercook your pasta just a touch if you're going to put it in the oven for a while. Especially if you're going to have that breadcrumb on top, because the breadcrumbs take a while to brown. So it's going to take a while for this to come up to temperature. While it's coming up to temperature, I'm going to season it. So I'm going to add a little bit of paprika. Now, this has no heat to it. It just adds a nice color when it's all over. So I'm going to add a little bit of paprika. This is about a teaspoon of paprika. It's just adding a nice color to the final sauce when it's finished. I am going to hit it with some salt. Now, I don't have to salt it too much because the cheese normally is very salty. So I'm not going to salt it too much. I'm just going to add a little bit of salt there. And I'm going to add a little bit of cracked black pepper. You can, if you want, add a little bit of cayenne to this. You can add a little bit of crushed red pepper. I've seen that in here. I've also seen people take this, shave a little bit of onion in here. So that what they'll do is they'll take a grater and they'll cook a little onion in here. Traditionally, you would poach an onion in this, and that would create your bechamel sauce. But we're not doing that today because we're just going to rely on the cream sauce and the cheese. Really, again, we want to make this simple. We want to make it so it's just as easy as when you grab that blue box. We want to make this just as easy as that. But adding a little onion to this or a little garlic to this would be wonderful. It's starting to steam, but it's not getting thick yet. The reason why you don't add a cold roux to cold liquid is because it can lump up. And the same reason you don't add hot liquid to a hot roux is because there's a better chance that it can lump up. And nobody wants a lumpy sauce. Now this is going to turn what they call nappe, which means it coats the back of a spoon. And it's going to eventually get there. I don't technically need to keep whisking it right now because there's not any lumps in here. And I am going to start I'm going to switch back to my spatula now and just stir it with that. And you can see it's getting a lot thicker than it was, which is good, what we want. That's what we want. I want it to be nice and thick. And we're going to keep stirring it until it just starts to bubble a little. And then we're going to take it off the heat. It doesn't really have to boil for too long. It's just got to boil for a second or two. And we want to make sure it doesn't burn. This is thicker than regular milk. And so it not only will it foam over if we let it boil too much, it will also stick to the bottom of your pan. So you want to be real careful here. And that's a nice thick sauce. That's a nice thick sauce that we're getting and we're creating here. And it's going to thicken up too because we're going to add a bunch of cheese to it. So it's boiling. While it's on here, I'm going to turn my heat down and I'm going to add my brie while it's still on the fire here, technically. I'm going to add my brie to it because the brie is a big, nice lump and I want to make sure it starts to melt before I pull it off. Make sure you take the rind off your brie before you put it in here or you'll have a big floating piece of brie rind in here, which is not great. And that's thickening up real nice. I'm actually going to power this down because the brie is starting to disintegrate and turn smaller. I can feel it in here, but it's very small now in comparison to what it was. So we're going to now start adding our cheese. Now, we don't want to add our cheese while it's cooking because we don't want this to break. So our brie is almost cooked out. And we're going to start adding our cheese nice and slow. And if it starts getting too clumpy, what we're going to do is we're going to turn it on just for a second. But we don't want to break our sauce. We want to add our cheese. All right, that's a nice looking sauce. We're looking good here. It's getting smoother. We want it to be smooth when it comes on. Spreads out smooth. We're going to power this down. Now I'm going to add this directly to my macaroni and I'm going to give it a nice stir. What we don't want is for it to be grainy. And like I say, if you melt it and you cook the cheese too long, it will get grainy. And now look at how cheesy that looks. Tell me that's not better than that violently orange stuff that you get in that blue box. Tell me that doesn't look better than that. I don't even know, like that ultraviolet radiation orange that thing turns. All right. We're going to do this two ways. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little casserole and I'm going to do a gratin top on this. And so, what do you need for a gratin top? More cheese, of course. I saved and reserved a little bit of this cheddar, and we're going to gratin top this. What we're going to do is we're going to stick this in the oven. A nice hot oven, about 375 degrees still oven, 350 convection. We're going to cook it for a minute or two. Now, this is hot, so it doesn't really have to come up to temperature. What we're going to do is we're going to first melt the cheese on the top. It's going to take about 3 or 4 minutes, and then I'm going to put it under the broiler and get it nice and dark on top. So I'm going to put it in the oven now. So now I'm not a huge fan of the panko topping or the breadcrumb topping on top of the mac and cheese. I know that's a very traditional way to make mac and cheese, But for me, it's just not, I just really don't appreciate it and don't enjoy it. That being said, if you want to do this, I have a really simple way for you to do this without actually baking it and spending all that time rebaking it in the oven. So what you do is you take your panko breadcrumbs. Now panko breadcrumbs are, these are Japanese breadcrumbs. They're very dry and they're very crisp. And I'm just going to dump, about a half a cup of these into a bowl. And then I'm going to add a couple of tablespoons of olive oil to this, maybe about a tablespoon and a half. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stir it up. Now what this is doing is it's coating those breadcrumbs with the oil. So now when this goes into the oven, they're not going to burn. Now you would do this if you were going to put this on top of your mac and cheese and cook it and continue to cook it the traditional way. You would dump this on top and stir it up, make it so it's that the breadcrumbs are completely covered with this oil and that the oil is nicely distributed in here. And as you can see, it looks like a little bit like a little thicker than it was, but they're just, all they are is just, there's a little bit of oil on each one now. What we're gonna do is we're gonna toast this separate from our mac and cheese. And so I'm gonna toast this in the oven, and then you can just take this right off the stove, dump a little bit of this topping on there if that's what you want, and you don't have to rebake it. You could actually just have this topping ready to go. But it does need to be toasted. So that's what we're gonna do now. We're gonna put this in a 350-degree oven for a few minutes. We're gonna keep our eye on it. And then once it gets to that correct color, then we're gonna take it out. I wanna spread it out nice and even so that all the breadcrumbs get a nice bit of radiant heat from the oven and that they brown evenly. All right, so let's say you absolutely need that crunch. Here's my toasted breadcrumbs that I put in the oven. To this, I'm gonna add a touch of this Parmesan cheese that's been grated. I get mine from the grocer, but you can use that stuff that's in the powdered stuff in the can. This is actually a perfect use for this. It's a couple tablespoons worth, and I'm gonna toss this. And now to add a little bit of extra specialness, and one of the things that you really can't do when you bake this on top of there, is what we can do is we can chop a few chives. And I'm just gonna slice them up and then toss them into my already prepared breadcrumbs. I like mine a little fine, but you can chop them however you like. And that adds a nice little onion flavor to this. And then just take your already cooked mac and cheese, sprinkle a little of this over the top, and then it doesn't have to go back into the oven. You can just eat it right now as it is. And even though I'm not fond of it, I'll still eat it. In my opinion, this is probably the best way to make it with the breadcrumbs. Because the breadcrumbs, there's this guessing game. You don't want to cook your pasta too long. And that tiny little bit of onion in there, oh, it's really delicious. And you do get that crunch with the breadcrumbs, which some people really do enjoy. If I were to choose to make it, I would definitely make it this way over putting breadcrumbs on top and then sticking it back in the oven. There is my gratined mac and cheese. Took only about, it's not as fast as your Kraft dinner. I will say that. It's not going to be as fast. But it's going to be 1,000 times better. And the presentation on this looks so much better than it does the stuff that they put in that box. So here we go. So you can see this is a nice gratin top on here. This is what I prefer. I'm going to get a nice big helping of this and give it a shot. Again, this sauce in here is not gritty. It's that ratio really works out really well. So now this just came out of the oven. It's going to be ripping hot. So I get to burn my mouth on camera, which is always fun. All right. Don't skip on the Gouda. The Gouda adds such a wonderful umami layer underneath. Don't get me wrong, the cheddar, outstanding. And it's got that sharpness. I got a sharp cheddar. I got a sharp New York cheddar, really good. And that's what I put on top. So there's that sharpness when you bite into it, but that one really beautiful umami layer underneath, that's all that Gouda. There's also that really deep creaminess that you get because it has that double cream brie in it. So it is a perfect medley of cheeses. Experiment, have fun. You know, anything that melts is going to be very good, of course. So Parmesan is one of those wonderful melty, hard cheeses. So is Gruyere. You could put Swiss in here if you're a Swiss fan. You can do things like Havarti, Munster, all those cheeses that melt really well. They're going to be beautiful in this, and they'll add a nice different type of flavor. I really do like this cheese medley though. So I hope you try this recipe out. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what your additions are. Especially if you have a family tradition of what you would normally put in there. I've seen tomatoes in this. I've seen bigger chunks of bread on top. I've seen all kinds of different things. Certain families even use eggs as a thickener for their sauce. So let me know what you did growing up and what your family traditions are. I want to thank you for tuning back in. Sorry we took such a long break. It was really hectic with the move. Make sure to hit that little bell below so you know when I upload. I'm going to try to upload on a little more average basis, a little more regular, but just hit that bell so you know when I upload. Like, share with your friends. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again next time.